Boys,
Hi, everybody on YouTube. I know we're on a different channel than we're usually on, but that's because we're kind of having a fight with YouTube. We are on, what we're on is my old political page. Hi, everybody on YouTube. And we have, what we've done is I'm going to copy the link here, and then I'll share it over to Facebook, and then we'll go on from there. We have done an end around.
YouTube now.
We've done an end around.
we can't let the man keep us down, boys.
That's for sure.
Do we have?
And I've copied the link on YouTube. And now what I'll do is I will, hold on a second. I'll send you over the link to you guys. And then I don't know what the best way to get it out to people is. Let me just do a little magic here.
If we were to, well, we got two watching right now.
Oh, you can see it?
Yeah, you can see it's on there.
Okay, Pat, I'm sending you the link. Put the link in that one.
Well, I don't know what you mean.
Is it wait, hold on a second. It's P Walsh at Donahue.
You can get the link right off the Zoom page. You just click on the thing that says live on YouTube, get link.
Yeah, no, I have the link. I've pasted it. I got it.
Oh, okay. Good. See, it's a really tight show.
Well,
I've said this before.
We've got people trying to keep us down, man.
It's the production. It's the production. This is like, Disney might as well be behind this.
We run a pretty tight show around here.
Can I tell you guys what I did hours ago?
Like pirate radio. What happened? What'd you do?
I stopped following Bad Legal Takes on Twitter. Do you guys follow Bad Legal?
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Did you see why?
Why?
No, I didn't.
So what happens is somebody on Twitter puts a Bad Legal Take, and it's almost always wrong. It's some crap where they're wrong on the First Amendment, or some idiot person with a blue check says some crap like, so-and-so would talk to the cops if they weren't scared or whatever.
Right.
Today they post a video of this woman who looks like she's right around like 17, 18, 19, somewhere right in there. And she's on TikTok saying something to protesters like, if you're forced to sign something and confess, but you put the initials like C.V. before your name, then it doesn't count. Or, I mean, she's just wrong on what she's talking.
At least she has that part right.
Yeah. But so there's like 90,000 followers of this Twitter account. And I was just kind of like, gee, she looks young. Do we even know if she's 18? Like, do we have to mock this girl in front of the world? And then I just got slammed with all these idiot like lawyers saying, it's misinformation, it's wrong. And I don't know, it just seems kind of like, mocking adults in the middle of an argument or people with blue check marks for saying crap that's wrong is one thing. Pulling a video off this girl's TikTok and we don't even know her age. I mean, maybe she isn't even in college. It just seems like, you're kind of ruining a girl's life over something that doesn't need to be done.
Is this the one about vegans and?
No, nothing about vegans. Pat, you should look at it. It's a pretty innocuous video. It's dumb. She's talking to protesters, but she's clearly young enough that you wouldn't really expect her to know. And should she be spreading misinformation? No. Is anybody going to look at this girl and think she knows what she's talking about? Also, no. Do we as lawyers who have law degrees and work as lawyers need to shame this girl? I don't think that we do. And I just got uncomfortable with people snapping back at me for asking, like, is she 18? Should we really be doing this? So I'm out.
Quitter.
It's going to be hard to go down your timeline and not see Bad Legal Takes.
I want, exactly. And just, like my take on this is like, you guys go to court and box with prosecutors, and I don't need to dunk on this girl. I do real law stuff with real lawyers, and I just feel like probably a lot of these people beating up on her are just people who do transactional stuff and want you to think they're really smart. So I love bad legal takes. Most of their tweets are awesome, but the comments on this just seemed unreasonably toxic towards somebody who's an ignorant young person. And I hate to say this, we were all ignorant young people at one time. So I'm out on bad legal takes.
It is one of the
Some would say
one of the super frustrating things about social media is that somebody will say X and you'll be like, X is wrong because of this reason here. And then they'll be like, how dare you talk about Y? And you're like, no, I was talking about X. And you'll never bring them around. It's impossible. Because you've attacked some base belief that they have, and you cannot be allowed to argue.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
should you do we put the new clip or the new link on the Twitter?
I did. I think I did. You can retweet it if you want.
Did you? No, okay. No, that's fine.
Retweet it. Broadcast that, Pat. Amplify it. Amplify it. Let the world know we are here today.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
And I had a bunch of people ask me about, there are lawyers legitimately interested in our experience, and I'll lump myself into yours, even though I heard from other people today about your trial. And maybe we should start with that, man. Like I was just telling Ray, the way the courtrooms are set up right now, they seem to have, especially downstairs in McHenry County, pushed the no-fly zone with respect to the judge even farther back. And it's going to take one defense lawyer getting COVID to shut that place down, because we are all way too close with no way around it, just as a general thing in court. I don't know if your thoughts are on the same on Pat, but
Well, our initial take when they shut us down and then reopened up, where they had, the 3-point line, it was more like a college 3-point line that we could approach. Now they've moved it back to the NBA 3-point line, but they've given us no more room behind it.
Right.
So it was, I think we analogized it to, 10 pounds of poop in a 5-pound bag. It's now about 15
That
pounds.
seems
of
like
poop.
a bag that's too small, Pat.
So Pat, Ray, I know hasn't seen this. Have you seen Ray, when you walk into court now, they have taken blue tape and taped up the pews and just left a spot where there's a person, then 8 feet they've taped in a person. So they've taken a gallery that would normally hold 35 to 50, and now it holds 4 or 5. Then they in some of these courtrooms have wheeled a little chair into the corner and stuck a press or public sticker on it. And I actually
that cures the public requirement right there, Matt.
So I
There's a
emailed.
sticker.
I'm not going to name names, but I emailed a reporter today saying, like, have you been to court and seen this? Because what happened today is there was a line of people waiting to get in front of the judge. I want to say 302, 304 felony.
Does the
case.
line go out the door?
No, but the line of lawyers is, let's say, 8 deep. And I would point out there were a lot of guys who aren't normally in McHenry County, because right now people are taking stuff everywhere. But if somebody is in that press seat, like say the press, they're sitting within 8 inches of a bunch of lawyers in a line with zero view of the bench, because it's just stacked with a bunch of people shoved in there. And it just seems like it's not really accessible to the media or the public. And I'm hoping the media, raises a
So
stink.
there's blue dots or blue tape for the defendants to stand on.
No, there's blue. There are cordoned off spots where defendants can sit, but they're probably 8 to 10 feet apart. And if there's one in row 1, there's not one directly behind him in row 2. There's somebody 8 feet over behind in row 2, somebody 8 feet over in row 1. So there's
Right.
maybe a handful of seats total. The jury boxes also got stuff marked off. So you can't.
So how does the judge call a defendant, or does the judge call a
The
defendant?
defense attorneys are lining up like normal, and then the judge is taking those attorneys. So the attorneys are standing in line, but normally where the courtroom might have 35 people sitting in it, it's got 4 or 6. And what we're doing is, before we get a case called, we're running out to the hallway hollering like, hey, John Smith, come on in here and stand there. So the press seat is backed up with attorneys, but then
Right.
also with people congregating by the door who are about to have their case heard. And it's honestly, in a 12-foot span, it's 8 people, not 2 people.
Yeah, no, they're expanding the social distancing for everybody but us. They're taking, every foot they give somebody else or prohibit somebody else from coming in, they're taking from where we can be. They're not letting anybody who's not a party in, even though they have that seat.
Right.
Yeah, it's just
so, like
we're getting just scrunched and scrunched and scrunched and scrunched, and it's it's for everybody's safety, not us, but for everybody else's safety.
And my takeaway on that today, having been there all day today and most of Monday, was it's going to take one defense attorney to say, I have COVID-19. Anybody who's had contact with me should also quarantine. And the courthouse will not be able to function because all of us have been within inches of each other. Wearing masks, certainly. But Pat, if Dan Hoffman gets it, I can't say I wasn't within 6 inches of him today. One of the Schwarzbach guys was there today. Bill Bly was there. I mean, all these people are there. And it's going to be like, like if Ray tests positive, thankfully Ray hasn't been there, but if Ray was there this week, we'd all be shut down for 2 weeks. So it's interesting. I mean, hopefully they don't take the tack that the show must go on if that happens, but
hey, Fetz is back. All right.
Fetz was asking me today how to see us, and I'm like, Fetz, you got to like and subscribe, man. You got to like and subscribe.
Hey, Fetz was not happy with me today. He was fairly upset that we've been off for the last couple of days.
Fetz looks like he's been very, very busy growing a beard.
Dude, Fetz's facial hair is amazing.
And he managed to find a mask where he can tuck it all up under there.
Yes. It's
Fetz
glorious.
He looks like he was an American president circa, 1842, doesn't he?
He's got some Chester Arthur in him, yeah.
So Pat, let's
Fetz, if you could go to ray@rayflavin.com and send me an email to figure out where to put the beard in the mask, that would be good. Thank you. Sorry.
Let's talk about jury trials.
Jury trials.
So
you guys did jury trials, but we predicted that the jury trials would not start to July 4th.
We were wrong on that, my man.
Ray, I cost you and me the over-under on that. We both took the over.
You did.
I cost myself money, Ray. I chooched
my
own.
I told you
on Friday. Wait, hold on. Technically, did you get a verdict? No. There have been 2 that started and 0 that went to verdict.
You know what though?
You can make an argument that jeopardy attached on yours.
I just want to say on Friday, I told you there was no way that a jury would go at all, and I was 100% wrong.
So let's back up to give the boys and girls some indication. Pat and Ray and I have been talking about this for weeks. I had a DUI that was about a year old. Fields, no blow. Some facts that are good for me, some facts that are bad for me, and in circumstances where it's going to go to trial. Pat's was remarkably the same, except he had a little more mitigation on some of the field sobriety tests. So we both show up, we both answer ready, we go down, we look at the courtroom they're going to do this in. And it was me, Pat, Dan Nold, who did the trial with Pat, Bill Bly, a couple other defense attorneys came down to see this. The judge was really good about just opening the courtroom. My quick recommendation of the courtroom was that it is not even close to being ideal. If you were going to strip away everything that it was ideal and try to strip it down to what are the bare necessities that might keep a case from being overturned, that's where they went. They had taken a large courtroom. They had used even temporary seating to get 14 people into it, plus one press or public spot that would have required the press or public to walk within inches of a juror. There were jurors behind defense table. There were jurors that could not see the prosecutor's table. There were jurors that were in spaces that from our tests, Dan Nold sat in the witness box, would have obstructed most of the witness's chest and at times part of their face, depending on how they went. And I'll let Pat describe his concerns, but I looked at it and was like, this is, as far as the art and the craft of doing a jury trial, this is going to be terrible.
I will say this: McHenry County, the judiciary, judges, I'll leave it with the judges, have done everything they can to accommodate people who want a jury trial,
Truth.
and have also done everything they can to accommodate people who don't want to do juries under these circumstances. And to that, I'll tip my hat to the judges.
And I should just point out, and I don't want to be too critical, they put a lot of work into trying to sort that courtroom out. All right. So we're going to talk about things we don't like, but they obviously put a ton of man hours into this courtroom.
And, unlike a lot of times when, PQ, pre-quarantine, where it was, you're going to trial, I don't care what your situation is, you're going to trial. There was none of that in my experience here. It was, you don't have, nobody was marching us to a jury trial at the point of a bayonet. Okay. Circumstances shook out. I needed to do this trial. It was the worst. It was the worst. I'm not even going to say the worst jury trial. It's the worst contested, procedure that I've ever done in all my years as a lawyer. It was that you couldn't comply with what they're calling for as far as social distancing. You couldn't comply much differently and set up the largest actual courtroom we have any differently.
So wait, let's back up a little bit, Pat, before you get into the trial. You and I had a bunch of other people look at it. I'm sitting in the juror seats looking at you're walking around, the prosecutor's there, and nobody is really thrilled about this courtroom. I don't want to speak for the judge, but I think even the judge's opinion was like, this is what we have. Okay.
Right.
We go back to the regular courtroom. We're on the record and we both start firing off objections. Right.
Yes.
One of the questions that I had was, you're going to do jury selection and your courtroom only holds 13, 14, 12 people. You're going to bring 13, 14, 12 in. Normally you'd bring in 30, you'd cut them up into small chunks. You'd put 4, 6, 14 in the box at a time. You're only getting 14 in there now. So at one point I asked, where are the other jurors going to be? And the judge said, I'm not really sure about that. Now to fast forward a little bit, Pat Answers ready. They're going to give him that courtroom. Then they say they're going to do my case in the jury commissioner's room where all those jurors would be sitting when they're not in Pat's courtroom. So Pat Answers ready. Pat goes. There's a lot of questions about how do we deal with objections at the bench, all that kind of stuff. Pat, tell us how it went down in there.
They usually bring in a panel depending on how many trials are answering ready and how many, and this, again, this isn't a normal setting. You're usually looking at somewhere around 30 to 35 people coming in, give or take. Sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 35, depending on how many jurors they have and how many they need for different courtrooms. At this point, I believe we did them in panels of 8. I think we brought them in from the jury assembly room. The court security officer would go and get them. And I'm trying to remember the configuration. I want to say it was 5 and 3. I think we did them in panels of 8. So you go through and when you're selecting a jury, you have a certain amount of challenges for any reason. And we went through the first panel of 8 and we had 3 jurors. Then they went and got another panel of 8. Some of those were excused, some of those were accepted. But as opposed to, when you have them all in the jury box and you're looking at them, as a panel, as a group, and it's fairly compact and you're dealing with the same general area. They had these people spread out. They had these eight jurors in each panel spread out throughout the largest courtroom we have in the building. That went back and forth. The judge that did it, I think, did as good a job as he could, trying to keep everybody in the same general area. And by general, I mean the same half of the courtroom. We finished jury selection. We had anticipated doing jury selection and then doing opening statements and starting the trial the next morning. I think I got out of the courtroom at about 5:30, 5:45, something like that, which is, we started, what time did I start? Like 9:45?
Yeah, we got going pretty quick.
So they brought the first panel in, say around 9:45. if you bring a panel the way you would normally do it, I would expect to be done by about 2:30, depending on the makeup of the pool. So just the selection process was about 3 hours longer than normal. We didn't do opening statements. We had to kind of juggle the alternate. We had an alternate juror, and we put the alternate juror in that seat. I think it was seat 1. Remember the one in the corner where you could, the guy had to be leaning way over to even see anything. And even then it was partially obstructed. We put the alternate juror in there. I'm trying to think of how to even describe it or compare it to something that, people who don't do juries.
Can I ask you a couple questions, Pat?
Hit me with it, Ray.
When you had to address whether you're going to select a juror or not at the bench, how were you able to do that without the jurors hearing you?
So can I just, before Pat tells us, Ray, these were the kind of questions that we kind of had an on the record, as Pat or I or the judge or the state would have questions, we'd bring this up. There was a bit of like, well, we're just going to have to see how it goes. So,
well, I'm not trying to be mean, but
no,
we can see how it goes. That's fine. The problem is that this is going to come out when we finish with our first panel. We're going to want to meet with the judge and tell him what we want to do.
And what I'm telling you is I just want to get out there that Pat's going to tell you what happened. But as Pat's going down there, this is an unknown. Almost all of this stuff is going to be unknown.
Okay.
The three of us have done a ton of juries, and there's a certain familiarity. None of that was there.
Right.
So there's so much riding in a jury trial. Like we've said a million times, a jury trial is such an intensely personal experience. There's so much riding on this that we don't know. We're going to figure it out. You're trying to figure out, all right, I'm going to do A. And if I do A, what are the consequences? Who's going to see it? Is it, and you're doing this on the fly. You're doing it at the same speed we're having this conversation. And while you're trying to figure out that, it clearly detracts from your analysis and your.
Well, it's like trying to do two things at the same time. You don't do them as well. What happened when you came to that spot? What happened when you came to the spot where you had to talk?
Well, we could approach, we could go over the 3-point line to approach the bench. We kept our masks on for that. Now, as far as jurors hearing us, some of them were, think about Caldwell's old courtroom, the far corner, if you're looking at the bench, the far corner to the right, some of those guys were, I don't know that they could hear me speaking in the tone I'm speaking in right now.
Right.
But some of them are closer, and yeah, I'm sure they heard.
The other problem, the seat from the jury box, and it had to be, I want to say 50, maybe it was 35 feet. And
minimum 35, minimum.
Also looking at the back of Pat's head. So in the normal course of Pat asking a question, now thankfully, as Ray knows, you, Ray, Pat, me, there's never any problems hearing us for the most part. Okay. but somebody who's not one of us is asking questions to a witness here, and the juror is 20 feet behind him. So as Pat's asking questions, somebody's staring at his head, and Pat's hoping that person can hear. And if Pat turns to this guy, there's 6 people over here who's looking to get away from.
Well, and that's the thing. You guys have done enough of them where the juries in that courtroom is, other than the stuff on the old side, the jury's predominantly to your left side when you're conducting a trial in that courthouse. And as you're asking a question, you get a peripheral view of what the jury's reaction is to that question, what the jury's reaction is to that answer. I couldn't see if I'm standing where I normally do, and I like to, well, okay, I don't want to go down a whole rabbit hole, but as I'm asking the question, I can see one juror, maybe 2 if I step back. I have no idea what those other, 12 or 11 or 12 people, what their reaction is to my question, what their reaction is to the witness's answer. I have no idea. And if you don't have an idea of their reaction to that line of questioning, or, okay, nobody reacted to that, nobody seemed to be writing it down, you don't know if what you're doing is effective. The other thing too, and one of the problems I had, and one of the things that, Matt and I both brought up when we were discussing at the pre-trial, before the trial, is I now have jurors in a horseshoe behind me. Everything that's on my laptop, if I want to use my laptop, everybody can see. Things that aren't, exhibits that were necessary, Dan and I are talking about getting into evidence, are pulled up on the electronic file. Well, guess what? Everybody can see. And I did, that was a objection that I had. And that was something that I said that was going to be a problem. And ultimately it wasn't the laptop that was a problem, but it was a picture that we had on the table that was a problem that the jurors could see. And I was told, you have to cover that up, and the jurors behind you can see it, which I said, yeah, I know that was my objection. And I get, we can't have evidence that's not admitted being seen by jurors, but at the same time, I'm already handicapped by not seeing any reaction, not seeing what the effect that this is having on the jury. Now, not only do I have to guess what the reaction is to my cross-examination at that time, now I have to figure out what's on the table, what can be seen, what can't be seen. So you're adding, it's a DUI, divided attention test. That's what field sobriety tests are. You've now turned what should be, I don't want to use the word sacred, into a divided attention test. I'm not just focused on what my question is. I'm not just focused on what his answer is. I'm not just focused on what the reaction of the jury is, because I now I have to guess, but now I have to focus on, am I exposing the jury to anything else that's on my table? Can they see stuff? It's, what you should be able to focus, 100% of what you're doing here now goes down to a quarter of your focus and your ability to do what you're doing.
When you were asking voir dire questions, you had to face one direction. Then when you were done, you faced another direction. Then you faced another direction.
Well, when they put the panel in for voir dire, there was only 2/3 of the courtroom that was used. So when we're there, they wanted to keep us by the podium. And Ray, and both you guys have seen me do trials. I'm not stand in one spot kind of guy, which was the other thing.
To do with that podium is to turn it, wheel it, and push it against the wall, because that's where it belongs.
Yeah. So, I'm looking at the first couple we start with, Ray. I'm looking at the jury box, and we got 3 back there. There's what, 7 seats in the back row. So you got number 1 in the far back corner. You got 2 empty seats. You got 1 in the middle, 2 empty seats, and then you got the 1 in the back row by the exit door where the jury normally goes out.
Okay.
So I'm looking at, 1, I'm looking at 2, I'm looking at 3. Then I got to turn 100 or 90 degrees to my back. And then I got to start asking those people, the same questions. I tried to kind of split it in the middle and ask them questions as a panel as a whole. But when you're asking questions, same thing like when you're doing your examination, I have to see people's reactions to the question I'm asking them. Okay, are they telling me one thing, but what is their face telling me? I'm not able to do that because I have to scan through almost the whole courtroom to get their reaction. And at that point, their initial reaction to the question is gone.
Were you able to ask riot questions or COVID questions?
We asked COVID questions. There were some people that you could tell weren't super excited, but I think Matt tweeted out that the morale was higher than he expected. And I would agree with that. There were people there who I think were, yes, I get to get out. I get to do something.
I don't want to co-op the story, but on my jury, which I'm guessing since they only had 46 total jurors, Pat, did you get any of our recycled jurors?
I think we got down to the end. We brought in maybe 4 panels of 8, maybe I forget if it was 3 or 4 panels of 8. But we got down to the end, and the last guy was a friend of one of the prosecutors. Their kids have been buddies. Their wives were buddies. And of course, this is going to surprise Matt and Ray. That was not going to impact his ability to sit as a juror in this
Oh,
case.
he could be fair.
My client and I and Dan Nold, we're all going to get fair trials. Okay.
So you were charged with the crime too.
Well, and the judge, to his credit, just kind of looked at us and said, "Come on, really? Your wives have been friends. Your kids are buddies. He's hung out with you socially. No, he's gone." So he was going to be the alternate theoretically, or the last guy was going to be the alternate. So then we had to wait for another panel of 5. So that kind of delayed us. That was to pick the alternate. So that kind of kicked it off. I think that we might have had 2. No, we had.
When they were all selected, did they have anything in the instructions that talked about if you feel sick tomorrow, who they should report to?
No, and I didn't go a lot into the riot stuff, and that was a
conscious decision, is what it was.
Yeah, that was.
I wouldn't have done it either.
That was a demographically calculated decision.
Look, when it comes to McHenry County,
fine. Yeah, as I said, and as you said before, we've all done a lot of jury trials. So the thing is that you make those kind of decisions on the fly. Well, how does this jury feel? But you are hampered in your ability to create a feeling because you're in the round almost, and you're trying.
No, not almost. 100%. It was jury in the round.
I tried to describe the courtroom for the record when I answered Reddy, and I said this is theater in the round, basically. And Judge Gerhardt kind of looked up and he said that's an accurate description, except that there was a giant. What Pat is not telling you, there was a giant pillar immediately to the left of Pat's table, and then the state was kind of on a 90-degree angle. So not only is Pat looking around, if Pat stands up at his table and looks around, he can't even see anybody because there's a humongous pillar right next to him.
No, and they weren't sitting behind that for voir dire, but 100% when I was doing my cross, I had to. It's not even like, okay, you're doing it smoothly, like you're scanning the room, turning around, and you can gauge. You know, I had to kind of look over at these folks and make eye contact with them. And there was a lot of times where, you know, sometimes you do it as on purpose to make a statement, but there were times where I had to make a choice. I had to look at the jury. How is the jury reacting to my questions? Which meant I had to turn my back to the witness to gauge the people that were behind that pillar's reaction. And now I don't get to see the reaction of the witness to that question. So you're essentially getting, the whole trial, the whole process of the trial was, I want to keep it porn free and family friendly. Do you want to get kicked in the right side of your groin, or do you want to get kicked in the left side of your groin? Make your choice. You're getting kicked.
So Pat, I have a couple questions then. Number one, did this setup with people behind you during trial or voir dire, people in front of you, people everywhere, and I guess I'm not going to say did it, could it? Because everybody does this differently. I don't really like to get a lot of communication from my clients when I'm trying to listen and trying to talk.
I agree.
Did this impact, or could this have impacted your interaction with your client at all?
Oh, 100%. 100%, because you're scanning, and it's not just when you're doing cross-examination. When you are, when the state's asking questions, and where it would just be a casual glance over to see the reaction of the jury, where they don't even know you're looking at them. There's 2/3 of the jury that I could not see unless I turned all the way around, in which case you're telling the jury, ooh, that was a good one. I want to check your reaction. So whether or not they catch it, they're saying, well, why is he looking at me? Well, that must have been a bad question for him.
Yeah.
So, and there's so much. Maybe I overanalyze it. Maybe a jury's not that hard. I think it is. I think being able to, pick up the nuances in the room 100% steers the ship and where you go.
I think juries are like any other skill, basketball, anything, which is, you know, to pick up on 90% of the game takes 50% of the effort. The last 10% takes 50% of the effort, right? And then when you throw yourself into a scenario where stuff that is normally not on your mind is stuff that can impact the trial. I mean, it's just unnerving. It's hard to explain to people who've never done or don't do a lot of jury trials just how exhausting they are normally. Your brain literally shuts off to everything except what is going on in that moment. And it's a little bit liberating because it's like playing sports. If you ever played sports and people are cheering, you don't hear them because it's like that. But when you're done with it and you free your brain, I don't know about you guys. I'm usually exhausted. Like I just want to get an iced tea and get something to eat and keep my phone off and not have to worry about any of it. Right?
It's the most physically exhausted you are by doing a mental exercise, other than taking like the bar exam or something.
Yeah, it's crazy you say that, because like if I know I'm going to do a trial, like I'll take snacks and stuff, but you are like, I ache physically. If something goes on more than a day or two, it hurts me. Like I have arthritis in all my joints when I'm done. So why don't you tell us
now, just on that topic, how as physically exhausted as you are, just from the mental aspect of it, in you know, focusing in on just that and only that for on a good trial, you know, if it's quick, it's 2 days. On a long one, it could be 4, 5, 7, longer than that. The exhaustion from that, now put on a mask where half of what you're breathing is your own exhaust. It was the most exhausted I've ever been after any trial. And I got to believe, you know, part of that's not just the mental exhaustion, part of it's physical, because I felt like it was 1,000 degrees in that courtroom the entire time. So now do what we do.
I think there's something to that. The mask puts that humidity and that heat back on you, and 100%. You feel exhausted very quickly.
It was when you would take that mask off when you'd get a break, and I probably took it off more than I was permitted, and by probably I mean 100% more than I was permitted. But when you take that breath, that first or second breath with the mask off, it feels as good as when you're, you know, underwater for just about 5 or 10 seconds too long, and you come up and you take that first breath. It was amazing. And that's just yet another thing that you need to do in this configuration. You have to deal with that. So now before people get up, I know medical professionals are dealing with that, and I know that's part of their deal. And I'm not saying I had it as,
but to be fair, you're not used to it.
Right.
I used to work in an OR and had to do 8 hours like that. And I also had I had masks that I was familiar with, that fit right, that were tuned for me. I would have them. There's a metal piece that goes under so that it doesn't fog your glasses. I mean, it's a whole thing.
And that's part of the problem. I got a big old fat face, man. They don't make masks that fit me.
They do, because I have a big old fat face also.
So Pat, I'm interested in hearing, what if, you know, we got the general exhaustion, we got all that. What if any issues came up during the trial? Number one. Number two, how did you handle like the instruction conference and all that stuff? Because we know the jurors, and if we don't know, I'll tell you, the jurors deliberated in the courtroom. And then number three, looking back on it, the complaints you had going in about this basically not being a fair setting, I would love to hear if you think that those complaints were justified.
100%. I've got a ton of them stacked up right now. And again, you know, McHenry County is being as generous as they can be with not forcing people to trial in the setting. And I've talked to, you know, I talked to a lot of people who are up for pre-trial this week and have trials Monday and the following week and the following week and the following week. And I've kind of told them my concerns that I had even before I saw the setup, definitely before I actually did a trial. Every concern I had is not only justified, it was probably understated by a magnitude of, 5. It was so much worse. It was just so much. and don't get me wrong,
Did anyone explain to you why that they had set these matters for trial when the Supreme Court had struck the speedy trial rights?
no.
Ray, I'll tell you that Pat and I were both subjected to judges saying several times, if you want a date, I'll give you a date. You can have a date. In fact, I was told several times of the.
Yeah, but we weren't the one. We were. Hold on, and I mean, I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, we didn't put them up.
We weren't the ones who set these trial dates.
So
Okay. I mean, just to be fair, and I know that everybody, and you guys, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I usually say what I say, but the problem is, on all of my files from whenever they set a date, I put CBC. This is continued by clerk. This is a date that they gave me. When they gave me that date, on some of my cases, they set it for trial. Okay. They decided that's
Right.
going to go on that date. Okay. That is not the way any of this works. I always think of that lady with the wall. I'm putting people on my wall, or or whatever. That's not how any of this works. So when we're showing up to court and our case has been set for trial by a clerk, I kind of feel like I need some sort of explanation of why this has to go today, especially since you have wiped out speedy trial.
So I'll tell you this: if you had brought that up in court, and I just want to, I don't know quite how to paint the picture, which was when Pat and I and the other case, whatever, showed up in court. There's like maybe 5 cases, right? And Pat says he's ready, and I'm saying I'm ready. Basically, the entire day, and my case finally got pitched out by the state at 2:30 in the afternoon. It was an ongoing dialogue of other stuff. It wasn't like we're ready and we're sitting around. It was like, okay, we're ready. We're going to go look at this. We're going to go back. We're going to talk to the judge. If you had brought up that concern, like, Judge, this was set by the state, or this is set by the clerk, why is it going? The response would have been like, if you're not satisfied, ask for a date. And both Pat and I brought up the same argument that we brought up last week, which was, look, I'll ask for a date if you're going to put me on a date where things are going to be normal. If you're going to put me back on a date where it's still this scenario, I don't want a date because you're not curing my problem. So I don't know what Pat did after I left and I got shuffled off into the other courtroom, but that was not even something that was considered. And I would say that I was offered a free continuance or several times from both the state and the prosecutor, the state and the judge, excuse me. And I just kept saying that unless I know something's different, I just want to point out, because Pat and I did have a conversation. Like, I wasn't going to just answer ready if I thought it was going to hurt my client. Like there was in my head, there was a huge mental calculation about, should I even be answering ready? Why should I answer ready? This is kind of a sham. And for reasons that I don't really want to get into, I think it made a lot of sense to answer ready. But
and as I said, I don't want you to get into the answer if you don't want to give the answer. But it seems to me that, and as we talked about 2 weeks ago, we had this exact discussion. If I know I'm going to do a trial that I think that has a high likelihood of being reversed, that figures into my game, right? Now I can try it, and then if I win, I win. If I lose, I could say, what the heck were you doing?
Ray, an objective observer, and I heard that somebody had talked about my experience aside from me. An objective observer might have said that I was treating this a little bit like an offsides play in football, where I was trying to draw them offside and throw it long. And I'm not going to be shy about that. I think part of our job is to see where the rights are, what the end of the rights are, and what, if you push a little bit, what direction the rights go. So I'm not even going to say that I wasn't testing those limits and being a zealous advocate for my client. And I did look at it like that. This is a shot that if we lose, we might get another shot at it. So I didn't see my client really being hurt, our chances being hurt by it, but that was definitely something I thought about. I don't know.
Okay.
And my client was in sort of a, somewhat of a unique situation in that the client was under the gun from a timing issue and didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. That was kind of, I was going to trial at the point of a bayonet, but not a bayonet that was put in my back by any of the judges who were going to hear this case. And I don't think, and we'll talk a little bit more off the air, but
Well, okay.
I can say,
I have one other thing I want to do, and this is for our 7 viewers out there. When you have a jury trial, at the end, the jury's going to get the case. They're going to have to make a decision. When they make that decision, they have to make it unanimous. It has to be unanimously not guilty or unanimously guilty. If it's anything in between, you get a mistrial. That means that the trial has no effect. There's no ruling. So the idea is that I just wanted to give you a background before we talk about our next section here. So Pat, you did your case. You made your arguments. You got to the very end of the case, and the jury was deliberating.
yes.
Did they have any questions?
Hold on. What time
nearly
the jury?
What's that?
What time did your trial end?
I want to say it was 4:30ish.
Okay.
4:30ish was when the testimony and the instructions and the argument and everything was read. That's at that point, normally the jury we would remain in the courtroom. The jury would get up and they would go into the deliberation room. Well, the deliberation room is it's a larger room, but it's fairly crowded with 12 people. And, you know, I'm not going to go into the minutia, but I think the fact that they weren't in that room, and Matt and I have talked about this at some length, I think that had a lot to do with the result that ended up. So in order to maintain social distancing, instead of the jury going out, the judge and the bailiff and my client and I and my partner Dan and the state's attorneys left the courtroom, and they continued to deliberate in the courtroom.
Where they couldn't all even see each other if they stayed in their seats.
If they stayed in their seats, and I tend to think they got up and moved around a little bit. I wasn't in there, so I can't say for certain, but I feel like some of the chairs were in different places when we got in. I didn't see where they were sitting or anything like that, but so, you know, Ray, you're asking about a question. Ordinarily, they would, you know, for those of you guys who haven't done it or, you know, aren't attorneys, they'll write a question on a piece of paper. They'll give it to the court security officer, who will then bring it to the judge. And we're waiting. And, you know, usually I'm in the lawyer's lounge. That's where I've been doing it for 20 years. That's where I go to wait. That was locked up. So the bailiff would usually call me on my cell phone. Hey, we've got a question. All the parties go into the courtroom. We have a dialogue with the judge on the record, because it has to be on the record. And then we would send an answer back to the jury deliberation room. Well, we couldn't do it that way this time because the jury deliberation room was the courtroom. So finally, about 8 o'clock, we had a question. Bailiff calls me. All right, you got a question? Okay, we're going to meet outside in the rotunda on the second floor. And the two prosecutors, my partner and I, all looked at each other. You know, the state's attorney were letting us in because we went and sat, and, you know, Dan sat in his car, I sat in my car, and we talked through open windows because there's nowhere to wait for deliberations. We're walking in, which, by the way, 2 times I walked in, I forgot my mask and I had to go back to my car. We walk in, and the first thing anybody says is, okay, how do we do this on the record? And there was, you know, some discussion. Okay, well, maybe we can summarize, we can have our discussion here. We can summarize it. If it's an appellate issue, obviously, I mean, Matt, you know this better than anybody. A summary is not the way you want to have your argument portrayed in an appeal.
No.
So, and we couldn't, and you can't go into the jury room. Like, we can't, none of the parties or the judge can go into a jury room during deliberations while they're deliberating. So we certainly couldn't go into the jury room, which was the courtroom at this point, and say, you have to leave, have our argument on the record there. So we were having the trial on the second floor. We had to jump through some hoops to find out what courtroom had a recording device still on. If there wasn't one, could somebody turn it on? How does it turn on remotely? So that took, you know, a huge amount of time. We found a courtroom, we went in, we had our argument, discussed the question. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want to go into the question or anything like that because it's still a pending case. But so we had that argument. We left the third floor. before we got back down, because it had taken so much time, we got back down. We were almost getting ready to walk into the courtroom. And then they had another question. So then we went back up to the third floor, went back in there. And ultimately the answer was going to be the same for the two questions. But we had to go and not just say, okay, we're going to give them the same answer. We had to lay out the reasoning for that answer that we had already laid out for the first question, for the second question, because you have to make a complete record. And then we went back down. And at that point, it was probably by the time we answered the second question, I want to say it was between 8:30 and 9 o'clock at night, which, by the way, if I'd spent that much time in my car, I could have almost been like 60% of the way to Atlanta. You know?
Yeah. Northern Wisconsin fishing for muskie.
Oh yeah. So, you know, that happened. And then, you know, we kind of, the prosecutors and us sat around and we talked for a little bit. And, you know, by the way, do not drink 60 ounces of water while you're in your car waiting with no access to the bathroom in the courtroom.
But you have to, because it's hard to stay hydrated during trial.
It's hard to stay hydrated during trial, even when they, you know, ordinarily they'll provide you with a bottle of, you know, room temperature water.
Right.
I didn't have that. And I wasn't real cool on buying water that had been sitting in the courthouse this whole time.
Well, you don't want to drink it anyway.
And I was, you know, I was super dehydrated.
Right.
And when you're dehydrated and you chug that much water, it's right through you.
Yep.
So we went back out and we waited till about 10:30. We went back in, had some further discussions on the third floor courtroom. And then, you know, ultimately we're at 11:15. At 11, we gave them till 11. We went in, we asked them some questions about, you know, whether further deliberations were going to help. And then, you know, we were told no. And so I think we figured out it was like 8 to 11. It was like 15 hours the second day that we were there. And it was over a day. We spent over, you know, 25 hours in the courthouse over a 48-hour period for no result.
So your jury trial wraps up with no result after 11. Your jury was out about 4:30ish, so you're talking almost 7 hours.
Yeah.
Is 7 hours of deliberations on a DUI average, above average, below average? And if it's not average, do you think anything about the circumstances of the trial may have impacted it?
Yeah. And, you know, Matt and I talked about this yesterday. When you put 12 people in a, I'm not going to call it confined, but it's not necessarily the most spacious area, and you're having an argument with somebody who's either at your elbow or tabled away from you, it has a different impact on you, you know, and sometimes it gets heated in there, man. I've heard them sitting in the courtroom. I've heard them from down the hallway yelling, and it gets heated. And there's a sense of urgency to resolve an argument when somebody is, you know, a foot away from you or 2 feet across the table. There's a sense of urgency, I think, and it's just human nature to resolve that one way or another. And they were so spread out. It's essentially, you know, two Bears fans sitting in a living room arguing across, you know, 25 or 30 feet. You don't having a discussion or a dispute or an argument or whatever you want to call it from 30 feet away. I don't think, and this is just my opinion, I don't think you have that sense of urgency to come to a conclusion like you would had they been in a confined space. And I firmly believe that. And it's funny because I had that thought, and, you know, and Matt, when we hadn't even started talking about it, you know, Matt pretty much echoed the thought I had in my head. 100%. I think that had an impact on the deliberations, because there was no sense of urgency, or I need to resolve this because this guy's right next to me yelling. I need to figure it out.
From a psychological standpoint, and I've been thinking about this since we talked yesterday. Police citizen interrogations, pre-trial conferences with settlement conferences in civil court, business negotiations. I can't think of a setting anywhere where when two parties sit down, forget 12, parties sit down with the idea of getting on the same page, saying we're not going to leave a room until we all agree on something, that they're basically shouting across a 50-foot long conference room. And the reason maybe there is one, I'd love for somebody to tell me, but I think the reason that this is all a sit down at a table and hash stuff out part is because when a person's arm's length, I mean, it's a different dynamic. It's a different feeling. You interact differently. And it's like, to me, offensive to the process to just say, we're going to throw these people in this room. We're going to tell them by governor's order, they can't be close to each other. You know, everything from conducting a straw poll to shuffling out to go to the bathroom one at a time is going to require people to shift so they don't get close, and telling 12 people they have to get on the same page. It's like, you know, I can't think of an analogy. It's so contrary to the way that humans interact that it's surprising to me that it was even suggested. And I'm not shocked that after 7 hours of jury deliberation on a single trial witness or a single witness trial, right, Pat?
Yeah. Yeah.
What, was there a video?
Yeah.
So a single witness trial with a video. And after all of that, these people don't have that idea that, look, if I can't get on the same page with this guy or get him on the same page as me, and I can't close our intellectual gap, you know, that this is an end we have to meet before the end, that end was never accomplished. I'm not surprised. And I mean, I would hope, and this is ringing the bell I've been ringing for years. Like, have they reached out to you, Pat, and said, what was your experience? Like the administrators of the courthouse, what is your experience? You think they've reached out to the jurors?
The administrators, it was almost, the administrators didn't go out of their way not to ask us. I think that the judges were really good in taking our input and asking us what we thought and how we felt we could conduct a trial. I think the judges were great at it. Mm-hmm. I think the administration was, not only did they not, I think they went out of their way to not ask us, is the feeling I get. And that the judges handled it perfectly. The administration, I think, handled it like garbage.
What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, I'm going to have to retry this thing on July 22nd. I know that, or 20th.
I tell you what, I got a little sneak peek on that today. Apparently there's a felony case that's going, and I'm not going to get into my whole story. The long story short is I got shuffled out to the secondary courtroom, and it ended up getting continued after a lot of other complications, not by me. The state asked for a date. I didn't object because even though we kind of had 10 people in the box, not selected, but the first 10, I don't think the prosecutor's office or myself was really comfortable with the fairness of the scenario. And I don't think it's slanted one way or another. But what I heard was there's a felony murder or drug-induced homicide that will be going to trial there in a week or 2 weeks that they're going to try to do in the jury commission room. And I can tell you that the jury commission room is where they try to do my trial. And although I was not satisfied with the way it was set up, and I had a lot of concerns about how it was set up, I think they can tweak it and make it actually a pretty viable platform. The way it's going to be set up is you're going to walk in and you have a witness, a court reporter, a judge, and a clerk, then the state on the wall, defense on the wall, and then like a school classroom, everybody facing the judge directly with their backs to the wall behind them. And I've been thinking about this. It's almost going to be like you're on stage there without being on stage. You know, if you're comfortable turning your back to the judge when you're giving your opening and closing, it's going to be a really cool opportunity. But it wasn't there on Monday. I mean, Monday they kind of walked in and said, this is what we're going to do, Matt. And none of it was set up. And then there were some issues when they did set it up. But I think going forward, Ray, that's going to be the preferred courtroom because it eliminates a lot of the problems Pat had. One of which is they can leave the jurors in there to deliberate and go into a recorded courtroom to use it for other stuff.
Yeah. Pat, was there any discussion about voir diring jurors maybe one at a time or two at a time?
Bringing them in one at a time or two at a time?
Yep.
We initially said we were going to do rack 14.
Well, I understand that rack 14, and the problem is that obviously you experienced deep, flawed, you experience very, very, very constitutionally suspect problems here. Do you think that if you did it one at a time or two at a time, that it would be that way? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be the theater of the round. We bring them in as they go. We send them back out somewhere else. You see how that,
the voir dire process, I asked to bring them in panels of 4,
right?
which I think I'd still be trying the case if we did it that way.
Well, I
But we
think
could-
that, well, no, I think if you do it 1 or 2 at a time, you make the case, your case is a week long.
Yeah. So in there was some discussion back and forth. My concern was the same as I had trying the case in that configuration. Voir dire is not possible under those circumstances because it's as crucial as it is to see the reaction of people during the trial. It's much more crucial to see the reaction to the questions, not necessarily their answers, to read the body language and read their reactions during voir dire. So that's why I wanted to do them 4 at a time, because 4 at a time we could have legitimately found a way for social distancing in the jury box, or 3 in the jury box and 1 in front, and we could have all done them where we're facing them all simultaneously. But ultimately, the number of 8 was settled upon.
You said that you spent 25 hours and you were assisted by another attorney. If we set you on the low end of the range and give you $300 an hour, that's $15,000 in attorney's fees. Did the judge ever discuss that might be unfair to subject a defendant on a misdemeanor matter to that sort of situation?
That's a really good question, because when Pat set the fee on this case, Pat's case was an 18 case, right? 2018.
Yeah.
When Pat sets the fee on this case, Pat's thinking like normal trial, normal stuff, charging it normal. Now he's showing up to something that is very labored because of the circumstances.
So is it fair to assume, Pat, that you ate $15,000 worth of attorney's fees?
Probably more than that, because I'm going to do it twice.
Oh, right. So maybe potentially we're looking, and I mean, it's unlikely that it goes the same way, but potentially we're looking at you're eating $30,000 worth of attorney time. And is that ever mentioned as far as how onerous that would be to the civilian population if you weren't so generous?
No. That topic, my financial hardship, surprisingly enough, never came up.
You know whose time doesn't matter, Pat? Our time.
This guy.
So
Yep.
my listening to you talk and going through the stuff I went through and just sort of thinking this through, my big takeaway from all this, and it's interesting because this is something I never sat down and analyzed in my brain, but every courtroom that I've ever done a trial in, you can sit in counsel's table and through your periphery, maybe not directly, you can see the judge, the witness, and the jury all in one field of view. And the judge can see the witness and the jury and maybe 1 or 2 counsel table. The prosecutor can see all that. The court reporter can see for sure the witness and the judge, the people talking. And when you think about it, you're like, it can't be an accident that every courtroom is set up with this field of view. All of that was stripped away in your experience. And it does sound like, and I don't think you're being overly dramatic, that is not an accident, that is the way courtrooms have been set up forever, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. It can't be. It can't be. And the jury can see everybody from where they're sitting.
Yeah.
They can see everybody. That wasn't the case here. That wasn't the case here. And, without the witness doing some, yoga to get in the field of view of everybody.
And in your case, there were a couple witnesses who could see zero of the prosecutor when sitting at prosecution's table. So when objections came up from the state, all they're hearing is a voice behind a pillar saying objection, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
So I guess I have 2 questions. Number one, I guess it didn't become an issue. Maybe it didn't voir dire. Did the court reporter ever voice a concern about not being able to see somebody's lips? And number 2, are we being too dramatic to say maybe we shouldn't do jury trials until we have that field of view thing worked out, and that's something that should be important in designing courtrooms, in the post-COVID era?
If you'd have told me February, do you think that has an impact on your ability to do a trial? I would have said, oh, absolutely. if you would have asked me on June 4th, which you just did, I would say that setup and that configuration to operate a fair and equitable trial for everybody is not just important, it's paramount. It's paramount to having this to be an effective, fair process. It absolutely is.
It's frightening getting back to like our first couple of shows. I wonder when it's going to be when we're back there. Like, it's not coming anytime soon. They're going to keep firing out these trials. And I really wonder, we talked originally about what rights are going to be lost to people, and none of what, Pat, you're just describing, I don't think you technically have a right to any of it. Not in a case I've seen. And I'm very concerned that it's going to be one of those super important things to the defense of a person, or the fairness to the state, even, that we're about to lose, for as long as we continue to practice.
It's, in the grand scheme of things, the ultimate arbiter of that, did that impact the fair trial or not, is a body that has said your right to a speedy trial is not important. And that's written down, I think, in one or two places. I don't know. That's is etched in stone as a statute in our country can be. That was swept by the wayside fairly quickly. I can't imagine things like we're discussing now are going to even be a blip on anybody's radar screen, except practitioners who rely on that.
Yeah, and just to be fair, at least in my case, the state was right on board with every argument I made. When I complained about the setup of the courtroom, 0 times did the state ever step up and say that my objections weren't valid. They kept saying that we have the exact same concerns. So,
and I, you guys have known me for a million years, and the people listening aren't going to really appreciate the gravity of what I'm about to say. I could not have asked for more cooperation from the state or the court. And that's, I think, when all three parties are, all three players in the game are all looking at it going, no, I think that tells you what it is. I guess I told, somebody asked me how it was, and I said, if somebody were to offer you a seat to a Bears game or a Hawks game or a Sox game or something like that had the view that most of these jurors had, you would have said, no, thanks. I'm not spending any money on it.
Was it obstructed view at the old stadium? I once went to a Bulls Pistons game where I was literally behind a pole.
Well, yeah, it was, because, at the old stadium, there were several seats where you had to lean one way or another.
Look it up.
There were jurors doing that. And, and when I'm arguing, the only place where I could see, within my field of vision, I had to turn my head and kind of, move around a little bit, was right in front of the jury box. And I had to slide from from the jury box to where the reporter sits, almost to the bench. And I was admonished a couple of times to, hey, rein it back in. You got to, stay in your.
In front of the jury?
Not just,
those
hey,
that could see.
It was, just, hey, Mr. Walsh, you have to maintain social distancing. And I get it, but a couple hundred trials down the road, old habits die hard. I like to walk.
Right. Gentlemen, we've run over time.
Wait.
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Pat.
I have one more thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Matt, go ahead. You first, because I want to end on this.
Okay. So, Pat, I had pre-trials up. You guys had pre-trials up today. How did you answer?
In my head?
No.
No F way.
Yeah.
No, it was essentially based on my experience, I cannot foresee doing another trial in this configuration. May I have a date? To which the judge that I had the pre-trials in front of today said, yes, how's September?
No,
So-
we knew they were going to do that.
I'll just tell you,
We all act like, oh my God, we slap our foreheads. We knew they were going to do this. That was from the beginning.
I think, again, that's a credit to the judges who have to try these cases, who realize this isn't fair. That's a credit to them to say, we'll do it to maintain some degree of fairness.
No, I think that's the right ruling.
And it's not, when we go off, there's just a couple of things I want to tell you guys that I've learned along the way. But yeah, the answer today, and I have pre-trials up tomorrow. That's going to be my same request, and I don't anticipate anything different coming from the bench other than, what date would you like?
Yeah. How are you going to end it, Pat?
Well, not that we're done, but we're going to come full circle. Boys, the biggest travesty is this. Carol Baskin owns Joe Exotic Zoo now. Yeah, like I didn't have enough go wrong this week. My son told me this today. Carol Baskin owns Joe Exotic Zoo.
But Jeff Lowe got all the animals out before she came in.
It's a travesty. Absolute travesty.
Travis-sham mockery.
It's a Travis-sham mockery. 100%.
Travis-sham mockery.
Well, thank you for sharing, Pat.
Boys, it's been a pleasure.
Take care.
See you guys.
Good night, everyone.